Hey, this is Kirk Brothers, and we welcome you to another episode of Ministry Matters That Matter. We're at the Ministry to Youth Conference in Knoxville, and I have with me Jerry Elder. Jerry and I have been friends for a long, long time. I guess as a youth in action in Kentucky.
Yeah, 40 years
back
ago.
When Noah got off the ark and
Right,
joined us.
right.
It goes way back.
They had 5 presidents.
At those early days.
Right.
So we've known each other a long, long time, and I don't know of anyone that has a bigger heart for young people than Jerry does. And so in this episode, we're going to just learn from him, let him share his years of experience. So Jerry, just start off, tell us about your family, but also tell me the journey. I would be interested in what caused you to get into work with young people, and then tell us what's happened since then.
Okay, well, born and raised in Munford, Alabama. And the people that came through my family that were influences on me was Franklin Camp, Bobby Duncan, names that are passed on from this old world. But those were people there in my home congregation. Olin Warmack was another minister that was there. That's the congregation I grew up in on. Mom and Dad, Dad was not in the church until I was in college. So raised by Mom. Great grandparents, my grandparents were heavy in my influential life of that, but the church as a whole was basically my family of helping me in my spiritual growth and spiritual life. When it came to making the decision what I wanted to do in life, I was going into the Air Force. I had the Air Force Academy down on the listing. I was ready to be already accepted. And then something in the back of my mind was telling me, why don't you see about this before you do this? So I moved to Anchorage, Alaska, and worked as a civil servant for 3 months, and realized within that 3 months, this was not what I wanted to do.
I want to do something else with my life.
So the preacher at the congregation at the time, I did not realize this, had really been teaching me behind the scenes to go into youth ministry. I was known as Junior at home, named after my dad. Junior, what's the young people doing tonight? I don't know. Why don't you bring them over to the house? Let's do a Devo over at the house. Okay. Hey, what are y'all doing tonight? You ever thought about just taking them out and going bowling? Yeah. Let's go play kick the cans. Let's play hide and seek. This is rural Alabama. Okay.
Yeah, I got you.
And it was those type of things like that I didn't realize that the preacher was really setting me up to go into ministry. And when I decided no Air Force, it was like, okay. He says, you need to go one of 2 places. I said, what? He says, you need to go to Freed-Hardeman or you need to go to Memphis School of Preaching. He was a Memphis School of Preaching grad. My sister had gone to Alabama Christian at that time, now Faulkner, and I did not want to go where my sister had gone to school.
Start your own path.
Start my own path. But ended up at Freed-Hardeman, and it was weird because a lot of people think you know all about Christian schools. And this was 1979. You did not. I still in Alabama had never heard of Hardy, never heard of Lipscomb, never heard of Freed-Hardeman, really, other than a couple of people that I knew. And so, but Alabama Christian was the place. Went to Freed-Hardeman, fell in love with it, obtained my Bible degree, communication degree from there, and to get into the why of why youth ministry goes back to William Woodson. William Woodson was a jewel of a man. He loved training preachers like you. Yeah. But Kirk, he saw that I wanted to work with young people. Well, youth ministry, few and far between. You know how that goes in the late 70s and early 80s. There were men out there doing it, but not full time. He said, let me chart a course for you. And so what he literally did, I still gained the full Bible credits, but over these little categories over here of like American literature, well, take American Lit, but don't take English Lit. Let's put you in children's literature. There's an elective course called Recreation and Singing Games, a little single 1-hour course, elective. You ought to go take that. So he put me in, instead of general psychology, he put me in children's psychology classes. So he was, I think, ahead of the time of other people making youth ministry what it was. Nobody knew what to do. And so he put me in some classes put me in a class called Camp Leadership with Hoyt Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
The absolute best class I ever had as far as learning.
He directed camp at Mid-South when I grew up going there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so who better else to learn from? And that's where the focus of coming in. I've always loved young people, always loved it. And even when I graduated, Freed-Hardeman, it's all I really wanted to do. And that's where I'm at.
That's what you've been doing. I think about Brother Woodson. Brother Woodson was teaching at Lipscomb when I did my undergrad there. And then when he retired, I was preaching at Graymere. Of course, you and I lived across town from each other for several years there. But he and Brother Holland would do the Columbia
School of
Bible Institute over there. But he would also, not only did they, they do that retreat by that name, but then he would come most every Thursday and teach. In fact, the last lesson he delivered before he went in the hospital when he died was delivered as a part of that program at Graymere, but just had a tremendous impact on so many lives. So I think one of the takeaways from what I'm hearing is the value of mentors.
Oh, absolutely.
So tell me, how many years you've been in youth ministry now since you started working with the church?
It's 40 years and full time now. And so I did 2 internships, which I tell people internships in the early days where you were hired as a summer youth minister. You didn't work with another youth minister. So, but 40 years now.
So let's go a couple of different directions. My first thought is, what has allowed you to stay in youth ministry?
One simple thing: passion for the souls of young people. And that's the key. I do believe that the moms and dads have the greater responsibility of raising young people. But if I can be a catalyst, if I can be someone that's there for those and those that don't have parents. Hey, look, I tell you, my dad was not there. And I'm not replacing a dad. I want to be the person there for them when they need someone like that.
Well, I know you're still dealing with the loss of your mother. She had a tremendous impact on your life. And, you and I agree that the parents are the youth ministers.
Right.
But it takes an army, a village, a team, a family to raise.
It takes a church.
It takes
a church.
They need a lot of mentors. A lot of the research shows that the more mentors, especially mature adult mentors they have, the greater the chance they'll have faith.
That's why
that lasts into adulthood.
That's why programs like Last Leaders is so important within congregations too. I see. Last Leaders has
everybody plugged in.
Everybody, and if done correctly, and you let your members do the work, it's amazing what growth can occur.
Chap Clark talks a lot about the philosophy of adoptive youth ministry, that the whole church adopts the young people. So like you've worked with 2-3 churches in all those 2, I thought it was 2 churches in all those 40 years. And so you've been, of course, you were at West 7th when I was at Graymere, and then you've been 10 years or so now at Spring Meadows. So we talked a little bit about what you think is key to longevity in ministry. But for those who are joining us today, what have you learned about ministry in general? What are some tips that you would share, either about youth ministry specifically or just ministry in the Lord's church?
Well, I think one of the things that's crucial is when a person's coming out of college, whether it be Heritage, whether it be Freed-Hardeman, or any of our brotherhood schools that we have, they are given a beautiful, beautiful toolbox of knowledge and abilities that's coming out. And what happens is when that person comes out of that college, they're walking with their toolbox. They may not know how to use every tool in that box because they haven't put them to work. They've been taught about those tools, but they've never had to put that tool into work.
Gotcha.
And so in the ministry aspect of it, when a person goes to congregation B and they're at that congregation and they confront something like that, that's where they have to look in their toolbox and say, now, where did I learn about this? And they pull out this tool and they go, ooh, well, there's someone in that church, an elder, deacon, member, that says, let me show you how. I wish somebody had done that with me a little bit earlier, which I did have some people to do that to help me be more successful.
Good.
And it's kind of like working on a car. You got to have 9/16 to take that starter off.
We share a passion for Mustangs, by the way, too.
Yeah. And so, but now in that value, but the second value is, I think, Kirk, is passion. And one of the things that's really come back on me in the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years is falling in love with God
Mm-hmm.
and falling in love with his son. If you fall in love with God and his son, it is natural that you fall in love with the church that his son established.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about some surface love. I'm talking about a deep, genuine love.
Mm-hmm.
And in turn of that, in your ministry, if you have that within your own heart, it's going to make your ministry far, far better. Because you go, I'm going to come to you as a person that needs Jesus and needs the Lord, and say, hey, look, let's talk about this and let's go together.
Good. So talk to me, I know the importance of your girls in your life. So
Right.
Talk to me about, family and ministry.
When Pam and I have been married 39 years, I've been coming up to 40. And so when we got married, I took her there. She said, I'm not married a preacher. I said, nope, you're not married a preacher.
It's worse than that.
You're married a minister. She was involved in the ministry in the very beginning, but she loves working.
Mm-hmm.
She loves working. And so she has her own work, and then our daughter came along. She was involved even at 6 months of age. She would go on what I would tell people, the big trips.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we had to raise a child.
Mm-hmm.
And the greatest thing about it was not only did the eldership understand the fact that we were now parents raising a child, the congregation knew. I've heard people say, well, they don't understand the fact that when I've got a child now, I need to be a family person. Well, we made the choice to go into ministry. And while things may change in ministry, the souls don't change.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 a.m. phone calls don't change for us. And your wife has to understand
Mm-hmm.
things like that. She gets it. You're going to be gone on a 3-day weekend to CYC, or you're going to go to EYC, or you're going to go to Horizons, and you're going to do 2 weeks of church camp. It consumes a lot of your life, and your spouse can be there with you. And thankfully, if they can, praise God for that. But if they're not going to be there with you, they have an understanding.
Mm-hmm.
It all boils back to this. Do you love God and do you love Jesus? If your spouse even loves God and loves Jesus, they understand it. But you do have to take the time and make that time.
So you got, it takes a team.
Yes.
But you also, both of you have to buy into ministry.
Absolutely.
And you have to have a clear understanding between the two of you of how that's going to play out in your family.
Right. That's
and,
exactly right.
What trips am I going to go on? What trips am I not going to go on, etc. It's not an issue of loving God and loving you. It's just how do we do ministry, fitting our personalities and passions. So that's good.
Yeah.
One other thing I want you to share a little bit about, one of the things that you did in our community, you still do in your home there in Columbia, is your garage Bible studies. Tell me the genesis of that. I've heard you talk about it in classes. The genesis of that and why it is so connective to young people. Why does it seem to work?
Well, 21 years ago.
Wow.
21 years ago, I had 6 kids came to me when I was at West 7. 6 of my starter kids, man, they were great. They said, Mr. Jerry, we love Bible studies at church building, but our friends won't come. Mm-hmm. Okay, why won't they come? Tell me why won't they? Well, what can I do? They won't come because it's at the church building. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it was the stigma of the name on the sign. Mm-hmm. Remember, this is 21 years ago. Mm-hmm. Or what? I said, well, okay, we'll have it next week at the house. So we went to the house the very next week. Those same 6 kids came to the house. We had it inside the house. And I said, this is great. And then I have my Mustang that's sitting in my detached garage. And so one of the kids said, hey, I want to see the car. Walked out in the garage. And the garage is a bare bones, nothing, no heat, no AC garage. And one of my kids goes, dude, this is where we need to have the Bible study. And I looked at him like, no. And I said, yeah. And so I said, okay. So next week, sure enough, 8 kids. They said, mark it down. This is the place. And then they started signing their names on a door front at that time. It went from 6 to 12 to 20. The most we've had in the 21 years, we had 130 people there one night. Everybody packed inside of this garage, even outside the door. But it's a non-threatening.
Mm-hmm.
It's non-threatening. I don't advertise it as where it is a ministry of the church. It's a Bible study it's a garage Bible study at my house. And I always premise it, and I said, if we study anything outside of this word, you can call me out on it. Mm-hmm. But I want the Bible to lead you to the Lord's church. Yeah. And it will. The key thing about it, Kirk, is the consistency. Mm-hmm. Every Monday night, 7 o'clock. There's a handful of times maybe throughout the year that we won't meet. If it's like 20 below outside, we probably won't meet.
You still don't have it.
We don't have okay, so my heat is a kerosene heater stuck in the middle of the room. In the middle of the room, it is. But they will come and they'll be bundled up in these hoodies and stuff, and they love it.
And you had to move the Stang out, right?
The Mustang comes out. The lawnmower comes out every day, man. Hey,
my wife calls mine precious.
All I'll tell you this is I will move it out for the soul.
That's right. So, one, I think, big takeaway from that is a lot of times we don't realize how scary our church buildings are to people.
Right.
That if you grew up in an environment where you worship with Christians, you're not intimidated by a church building, or maybe you're not intimidated by the place where you've worshiped before. Right. But for a lot of folks, it's just like anybody. When you go to a new place or it's strange, different, have different customs, it's a little bit scary. And so I think one of the beautiful things about that is it allows them to be exposed to God by removing the fear and the barriers that go with those formal meeting places.
I had a young man to come in, and he knew I'm in the Lord's church, and he says to me, he goes, "I'm going to prove you wrong." I said, you know my thing. We study the Word of God. You will study together. He came every day, every Monday for a year. At the end of the year, at that year time, we're sitting there, time's over with, kids are mingling around. He comes up, he says, tears in his eyes, "Mr. Jerry," he says, "I've been trying to prove you wrong for a year. And all that I've heard is that the Bible is right."
That's good.
Became a Christian that night. He's faithful in the Lord's church. He's married. He's got family members. And, the
Word of God is powerful and effective.
Even in the garage.
Jerry, thank you for spending time with us. Thank you, all of you, for spending time with us. As you serve in the Lord's church and in ministry, just hang in there, stay tough, trust in the power of God, and know that His power is working for you. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Ministry Matters That Matter.